It's 2020. I'm 58 years old, and I've never had children. In my lifetime, I've watched the population of the planet double. Currently, the news is filled with apocalyptic doomsday scenarios of global warming, causing climate change, worsening floods, fires, hurricanes, and mass extinctions. So I've been asking myself, why do people still have children? And why did so many of us choose not to? The first question seems easy to answer: biology, the desire to carry on the legacy, someone to take care of you when you're old. And certainly it is glamorized in the popular media. Most movies portray having children as the single most important event in a person's life. So why did some of us go against all that pressure and propaganda and biological urge?
But I gotta tell you, I never had the hormonal urge to have children.
You know, I played with Barbie dolls as a young girl, but when I think back to that time, my Barbie doll would always get married to the Ken doll, but never ever thought about kids, and actually never thought about getting married.
I mean, I've never had a pregnancy dream. I have never, I think the only thing I ever wanted to do was to have a child to see what it looked like, because I'm sure it'd be really awesomely adorable, and to dress it in Gap clothes. And that's like the worst reason to have a kid.
When it first hit home for me that I did not want to actually give birth, I was in 9th grade, Columbus High School, and in those days, they did sex education as part of home ec, and they showed us a film of a live birth, and that was it for me. I watched the film, and it was very detailed and very explicit, and I just said, oh, hell no, that is never happening to me. No freaking way.
This is the only decision in life that's irreversible. Once a child is out, that's it. I can't do anything. So I had to be really sure. And I was never sure. So how could I bring a human into this world when I'm not sure? What if I did not want it? So I started living my life saying, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. I'm going to create my impact. I'm going to make sure that I care about people, and I'm just going to live my life, and I'm going to leave this question in a limbo till I know. And since that time, it has never occurred to me to have a child.
Even before we were married, we were planning to have kids, because at that time, everyone was probably, you just thought that you would have to have kids for your family.
It was the thing to do. Everybody was having kids the minute they got married.
And so then I was in college, and I took a marriage course, and the instructor said, you don't have to have kids, it's a choice. And so I went home and talked with Stephen, and he didn't want them either. So that's when we decided we didn't have to have them. But if it wasn't for that college course, our lives would be completely different.
That's the best yes, dear decision I ever made.
Growing up, ever since I was a small child, I knew that I was not going to be a parent. It was just never something that was in the cards for me.
Of course, I never thought we would ever get married either.
That's true. But I also, there are lots of gay people who adopt and who have their own children, or who had been married and had children and then came out of the closet. That's a whole phenomenon unto itself. But I knew I didn't have that gene, or I didn't have that
drive.
Yeah, that piece, because when people who want to have children, they feel it really strongly, and it's something that they're driven to do, and I understand that and I respect that. But at the same time, there are people like us who don't want to have children, and sometimes you're accused of being selfish, and I say, absolutely. I'm in my 20s and 30s, I was way too selfish and self-involved. But I think it's a commitment that you have to make when you have children. And I had other priorities in my life, and I was making commitments in other areas. And having children just never entered the equation for me.
I'm a gay man married to a woman.
Yeah.
And so that kind of makes the choice of not to have children a little bit more obvious, that, we weren't really attracted to each other. We chose to get married because we love each other very much and realized at some point that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together, even if it wasn't what people traditionally look for in a marriage. And we asked ourselves, why are we letting society tell us what a marriage has to be? It's like, if there's somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with, what does it matter if I want to have kids or not?
Yeah, and I have to say, when it comes to kids, I like kids quite a lot. But kids are an absolutely overwhelming 24/7, 365 commitment. I just can't believe people would want to have kids and not willing to spend the time and energy. And we much prefer our cats. We can love them to death, and then I can go away for 2 weeks of vacation and have somebody take care of them. Works for us.
Yeah, and for me, it's just, if there's a genetic part of wanting to have kids, I missed it, because I've never thought about having kids. I've never wanted to have kids. When people would show baby pictures, I'd say, that's nice. It would be cuter if it had fur, but it is not like I dislike babies or anything, but it's like somebody showing you a picture of their best pumpkin. It's like, that's nice, that's great, And it's just, even as a little kid, I didn't play with baby dolls the way that other kids did. It's just...
And we talked about this at one point. It's funny. We were talking about babies. All of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute. You know what they become? Teenagers.
During my time in graduate school, I had just turned 30, just gotten married, and I was about 2.5 years into my marriage. And at least on a weekly, if not a daily basis, someone was saying to me, when are the two of you going to have children? And no one had ever asked me about having children in my life. I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about having children. The way I was raised and the people I was raised by, I think it was always just an assumption that I would. And having this question come up over and over again, having so many people repeatedly asking me, when are you having children? I realized I was starting to get angry. And that this anger was about feeling how intrusive that question was in my own experience, and the fact that the response that I wanted to give and the response that I ultimately was giving was, I'm not going to have kids. I haven't planned on having children. We aren't talking about having children. I don't think that that's going to happen for me. And the more I said it, the more people felt the need to interrogate me. People felt the need that they could talk to me about my decision as if my decision weren't practical or correct.
I don't know that there was any one moment where I said, I am not having kids. I think it was just more like, rather than deciding not to have kids, I couldn't think of a reason to have kids. It just sort of, I was married in my 20s to somebody who was abusive, who it would have been a nightmare to have kids with. So that was my 20s. And then in my 30s, I was, getting busy with my businesses, and I was in a relationship with somebody who didn't particularly want to have kids either. And so, and then as life moved on, I was like, the clock's running out, and that's okay.
The main reason I didn't have kids is because I don't like them.
Not one to mince words, I'll tell you that.
It was evident, I should say, that he was not very keen on having children, and me, I was not keen on having children. So after we talk sometimes, and we say, no, we stay like that, it's better.
Not big discussion.
No discussion, it was evident.
During my prime childbearing years, was a partner in a large law firm in Los Angeles. And I had to make a choice whether I was going to have children or whether I was going to devote myself to my career. And I made the choice to devote myself to my career. I'm not a particularly maternal person. I've become more maternal as I've gotten older. And I'm now happy to borrow other people's children. but I'm still happy that I decided not to have children of my own. There was no way I could have done both. And I think women who think they can do both are either better people than me or they're deceiving themselves, one or the other.
So I don't know if it's the reason, but as we have no brother and no sister.
We were not used to children, and for me, I don't like children crying and moving everywhere and running, and it's the same for him, more or less.
I suppose it's what I call Christian child abuse. You know, the spare the rod and spoil the child. You know, that's an Old Testament thing, and Christians don't seem to notice that Jewish king that said that all of his children turned out poorly, per the Bible. So, you know, I definitely would not want to pass that kind of stuff on. You know, I do my best not to carry on, but I don't feel healed from it yet. You know.
In the country that I grew up, Pakistan, we never question whether we will have children or not. It is an expectation for a woman to have children. So when I got married, which was in 1997, we both were virgins, and sex was we were learning. So he didn't use the condom, and I got pregnant within about a month. That was the first time that I realized, oh my God, I'm going to be a mother. And that thought was so shocking that I started crying. I wasn't happy that I was going to be a mother. I was more or less like, oh my God, I haven't even lived life yet. I haven't even taken a breath, and I feel this is too early. So I decided to abort the child, and my husband at the time didn't support it. No, abortion is not legal in Pakistan, so I had to go under the table. And it was the most horrible experience of my life, because the woman wasn't a doctor. She was just some person who brought me into her house, into a normal, unsterilized room, used utensils that were probably rusty. I bled for about 21 days, and I had severe back pain. I had to go to orthopedics. I had infections. I had burning. I had painful sex. Like, my next 3.5 years were filled with pain and illness and medication, because the system does not support a woman's decision to abort a child.
The classic profile is, because here at least, where abortion is illegal, they try to say that the only women who want abortions are women who are promiscuous and, so forth and so on. But the actual fact is that the profile of women who have abortions here they are married, they're churchgoers, they already probably have at least 2 children, and they just can't deal with one more, And that was the case of this woman, Janjira, that we looked at. She had two daughters, and then she got pregnant, and she didn't want that baby. She had gotten a job. She was doing okay. Her life was sort of going forward, and because of the laws, she had to go and submit herself to a place where she had no idea who it was and what was going to happen. And as it was, they killed her.
It's not, I'm not sure if I had children, people would come to see me when I am very old and ill and bad, because now I think most of people of children, they don't care so much about their parents. They are far away, or they come once every 3 months. So I prefer not to have, but I am very worried about after my future. because we have no family. We are just the two, and we have very few friends. And it's the same. I don't rely on friends to come to see me after. So this is a problem because we will finish completely alone. And
no, it's a big problem.
It's a big problem. Yeah.
No, it's a big problem because when you are alone, and if we have no capacity to manage your life, to make your money, etc.
Yes, even if you are in a retired house, if there is nobody behind to look to people what they do around you in this house, I think it's not good. You finish badly. So that will be our problem. I am quite conscious. It's a bit sad, but I don't know. I can't.
No.
You're not going to have kids. Who's going to take care of you when you're old? And I'm like, well, you can't just produce people to be your elder care. That's really not fair. So that's one take on it.
Culturally, having a child is quite difficult, from the sense that there are a lot of expectation on the parents when the child is little, but then there are a lot of expectations on the children when children grow up. In a Western environment, 18 years old, and then children start to live their own life. It's not like that in the culture. And I think my mother and my sister and all the other people who were unhappy with their children started saying, never have a child because you're going to be crying for the rest of your life, even though you will give them all your heart and your tears and your blood, but they will not care, when the time comes.
I want to debunk this myth that people who choose never to have children are the ones who aren't cared for, and suggest that we might want to look wider at how we think about and feel about aging across the many cultures that make up the United States especially, and talk about what do we as communities value and feel is important, and how do we want to create community that is about caring for all, as opposed to relying on this notion that the nuclear family is responsible for the caretaking exclusively.
If I were that age today, this is 2017, I would never have kids.
Because of the state of the world?
Because of the state of the world. It's just really frightening where we're going. We're entering a whole new change in civilization that'll be studied 200 years from now. What happened in a relatively short period of time when it took centuries to get it to this point. It's changing in less than 25, 30 years now. It's scary. So.
Actually, it came into my mind when I was a teenager and when I was becoming aware of that I was gay and not going to ever have children. And it would also happen to be, a time when we had this whole ecology movement that had just begun. I mean, it was the 1970s, the early 70s, that the whole concept of ecology happened. I remember doing classes about ecology, and Earth Day started, and so it really was very much on my mind at that time that, I don't want to contribute to the overpopulation and abuse of our environment.
We do have to dial back the population situation. I mean, there's not going to be any place for everybody to live and not enough resources for everybody after a while. I mean, we're coming from a history where we had this country with all these wide open spaces, and we wanted people to fill up the country, both immigrants and, people that were born here. That was our country's big thing for a long time. It's like, let's get more people here and fill this thing up. But after a while, it's like, all right, that's good. We don't need any more, people, and especially people who are messed up because they were a project, or they were, I need to have kids because, or I'm trying to fix my marriage, or my clock is ticking, or any of these other silly reasons people have kids. I mean, this is a person, this is a human being.
At least for large mammals living at the top of the food chain, I don't, whether life continues on planet Earth, I'm very doubtful.
I just feel that there is, population-wise, I feel that there are just so many people on the planet, and there are so many of us who are disadvantaged. So if ever I want to have a child, it is going to be via adoption. I just do not believe in, I do not have the need to, perpetuate my DNA or my legacy is left in the ripples that I leave in people's life. It does not reside in the DNA of the child that may or may not, behave in the way that I want him or her to behave. So I think in terms of, to me, I feel more happy in creating an impact and actually knowing that that my life was purposeful, and that childbearing is not the only purpose for my existence as a woman.
With all of the horrible things that are going on in the world today, sociologically, politically, economically, drug addiction, I just don't know how I would handle having kids preteen through 30, because it's pretty hopeless, so I'm very happy. Sometimes I feel guilty for being so happy.
We all shared with one another the sense that we do share something in common that's very, very unusual, and at the same time don't want to feel left out from the rest of society because of this decision. And so that was a really interesting thing that I learned, is that my own feeling of feeling a little bit left out, or feeling a little bit like, oh, I don't know how I fit into the social fabric of parenting people, really came up as something that's a shared experience.
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me when you expose it is, it's a quintessential piece of cultural sexism. The whole idea that women need to deprioritize their own wants and needs. They have to put other people first. They have to be last. So a woman who says, I don't want to have children, is asserting that she has the right to seek her own happiness and her own joy in life. And that's just very challenging to a lot of people who do not want women to express themselves in this way. They want women to negate themselves, to erase themselves, to disappear into their children, into their husbands, into their families. And if a woman wants to do that, great for her. But the idea that a woman might want to put her own needs first is pretty challenging to some people.
Writing blogs because I was sexually abused. I have been writing for and helping women who have experienced similar kind of abuse than me. I have been working with lots of women, and also now I'm working with lots of Pakistani women to make sure that the things that I have learned to enable me to live a full life, I can actually pass that on to other women in Pakistan. I can actually help them realize that what they accept in the name of culture is actually abuse. They are shamed into slavery, and I want to change that. And I think that's a wonderful or purpose for me to live by, and that sort of feels like my calling, rather than have children and take care of them and give them my full heart.
I do some talks, and I do talk about this with other people. I'm excited to be talking about it right now because I think that sharing our story is the most important thing we can do. And I'm always on the lookout for how it's showing up in different places. One of the things that I've really noticed and that showed up in my own research is how women who choose to not have children are represented in the media and in pop culture. And it's generally not a pretty picture of any kind. And in fact, when I was doing my research, I asked other people the question, who are your role models? Or who do you see out in the culture that reflect back to you who you are? And most of the time people went blank. And that was very surprising to me. I thought that there would at least be some conversation around that. And if any answer was given at all, it was Oprah or a relative. But there was really no sense of having people walking in the world who look like me or look like other women that were sharing with me about not having children. And so part of the drive to have this conversation is because visibility is something that is a really big component of how this conversation continues to be underground. And I really am excited to see the real life faces, the real life stories, the real life voices of people who have made this choice.
In my culture that I grew up, I was the first one to break many of the cultural norms. So I was the first female mechanical engineer in the whole of my community. I was the first one to go and work in multinationals in my community and in my geographical area because I lived in the slums. I opened the way for a lot of girls now that they can work and they can actually have degrees that are not just related to teaching or doctor, because those were the only accepted degrees before me. But now things have become different, and I realized that actually these are the ripples that I'm leaving. In a way, I have lots of babies around that are running around because I was in this world, and now they are impacted by my actions.
The question of whether choosing to not have children is a cross-cultural phenomenon or whether it is, a Western perspective or a Western set of choices. What I'm seeing in the research from others is discussion, and important discussion, around constructs of social structure of family of origin, and questions such as, is there access to family planning as a conversation? Is there access to even making this choice for women in a variety of different cultures? And so the question that I find really compelling is, who is able or who is choosing to make this choice? What are the factors that enable someone to have this choice? And what does that mean for people who are living in circumstances or are living in a community where this choice would be considered so countercultural as to create even the potential for being removed from their community? And so part of what I wonder about choosing to not have children is who has access and who doesn't. And what does that mean? And how does that impact women's ability to discover whether or not this would be the right choice for themselves from the very beginning?